Are not well adapted to the tropical lowlands. Did I miss that one? That's wheat, sorry. Cereals are not well adapted to tropical lowlands, but are found to do well in the highlands of Mexico. And by 1535, wheat was being shipped from Mexico to the islands, because although the Spanish were forced to accept cassava bread and maize bread, they didn't like it. They wanted wheat bread, and so they were glad to have wheat from Mexico. And of course, wheat then spread to South America and much later to North America. And one of the most important crops in the world today, it is said to be harvested somewhere in the world in every month of the year. Barley, seen there on the left, was also early introduced and found to grow well in the highlands. I'm sorry to say that much of the barley in a large part of South America never reaches the hungry people. Most of it goes to the production of beer. At least that's true for Ecuador, from which this slide is taken. The plant on the other side, which you see the Indians gathering, is a daisy-like plant, Pyrethrum, which was much later introduced from Africa and is used to make the insecticide. Grapes for wine, whereas there is a section of the wheat market of the grain market in the market in Ecuador. And now we come to the grape. Grapes for wine were as important to the Spanish as wheat for bread. A priest of the time was reported to have said that if God had intended for the Indians to be Christians, he would have given them grapes. The Indians, of course, did make a wine from beer and an alcoholic beverage from maize, but they didn't use grapes. However, there were plenty of grapes in the Americas. The later Spanish were to find wild grapes all over North America. And one of these native North American grapes did become a wine grape in New England, or New York wines, for example, are made or used to be made from a native grape. But there's no grape quite like the old world grape for making wine, and that's the one the Spanish finally successfully introduced to the Americas. It failed in the West Indies. Again, it's not a lowland tropical crop, but it was successfully grown in Peru. And there was a harvest there in 1551. Peru today doesn't make a very good wine. They make a very good kind of brandy called pisco, but you do have excellent wines coming from Chile, Argentina, and California, where it was introduced by the Spanish. Olive oil was almost as necessary to the Spanish as was wheat and grape. But again, the olive is not adapted to the climate of the West Indies. It was eventually established in Peru in 1560. There is an olive, if you can make it out. And I don't know why I stopped to show you, because I think everyone knows what an olive looks like. But here is one of these old orchards in near Lima. Now, I don't know that this goes back to 1560, but it's a very ancient olive orchard which persists there near Lima, although it no longer bears. The New World never became an important producer of olives, although some is grown in California, as you know, and it's chiefly for eating rather than making the oil. The orange and the lemon were introduced on Columbus' second voyage. Oviedo later wrote that the fruit was very good and that by 1525 they had multiplied so rapidly that they were now past counting. The most abundant of the citrus fruits in northern South America is today called the limon, and it's what we would call a lime. This, however, I think came much later. It did not come by Europe, but it came after the Philippines were conquered. And there is one citrus fruit which we saw in the previous slide, the grapefruit, which originated in the West Indies. This may come as a surprise because all the citrus fruits are said to be native to Asia, but the grapefruit originated in the West Indies in 1770 as a hybrid between the pumelo, a grapefruit-like citrus fruit, and the orange, or perhaps as a mutant of an orange. Cuttings of sugar cane from the Canaries also went on Columbus's second voyage. That's sugar cane in flower, which beyond that hedge. And there is sugar cane for sale in the market in Mexico City for chewing. It's cheap candy, rots your teeth just as well. Columbus was familiar with this plant from his sojourn on Madeira. And there was a great demand for sugar in Europe at this time. And sugar cane soon became the first plantation crop in the Americas. Although sometimes cotton is thought of in the United States as the plant most closely connected with slavery, it was sugar cane that was responsible for the importation of large numbers of slaves from Africa. There were too few Indians left to labor in the fields. They had all died off. Sugar cane was the first plant that was also responsible for the massive destruction of the forest, not only for areas to grow it, but also for huge amounts of wood needed to boil the juice to crystallize it to sugar. Tropical Americas continued to be a most important source of sugar, and it is the number one crop in some of the countries, Cuba, for example. And most of it goes to the production of rum in some of these countries. The banana, another important Old World import, didn't reach Hispaniola or the West Indies until 1516, and it also thrived, giving rise eventually to the banana republics of Central America, another sorry chapter in the history of the United States. The starchy banana are a plantain, which is a starchy staple, also flourished in the Americas, and it became the chief food source of some Indian communities in South America where manioc had previously been their main food. But in reality, very few of these foods had great impact upon the Native American populations. Rice, which in the 15th century was a new crop in Southern Europe, was a still later arrival. I don't think that's rice. There we are. And it was first recorded by the Portuguese in Brazil, where it was introduced by the Portuguese in 1535, and later to other parts of South America. Today, considerable amounts of rice are grown in South America, some in Central America also, chiefly for their own use, for it's a very important food to the people in Latin America today. I recall my first sabbatical leave in Costa Rica in 1953, where I was served rice and beans with practically every meal. And I returned from another visit to Costa Rica just 2 weeks ago, and I was still served rice and beans with many of my meals. Rice reached the colony of North Carolina in 1685, and today the United States is an exporter of rice. I've now pretty well covered the period to 1550, and there's a lot more plants that have come more recently, and I will just mention a few of these very rapidly because I don't think people should speak for over an hour. That is soybean, which of course I think most of you knew here in this state. And it was, of course, a very late arrival, and now is one of the world's most important plant. And it came over very late. It reached Brazil in 1882, and the United States sometime later. Coffee came over from Africa, and it proved to do better in the Americas than it did in the Old World. There's coffee drying in Costa Rica. It's rather interesting. There are a number of these plants that went from one continent to another, did better in their new homeland. Various reasons have been given for this. One is that quite often the plant may have been exported without taking all of its native pests and diseases with it. Rubber, I haven't had time to mention many of the commercial crops. Rubber is native to the Americas. It was never domesticated, as was quinine, but quinine was never domesticated either. And both of these today do much better in Southeastern Asia. Some of the more recent introductions are plants like the pepino, which is now appearing in our markets, and also the tree tomato, which is sold under the name of Tamarillo, which is not a Mexican name, but a completely made-up name. These are South American plants which have gone to Europe and are also going to the United States now. And other plants are even more of a success story. The kiwi fruit, or the kiwi berry. As many of you know, this is a fairly new fruit, and it comes from originally from China by way of Australia and New Zealand. And enough for the plants. I must say that for good or bad, one of the results of the Columbian Exchange was a population explosion in many parts of the world. The potato was certainly one of the reasons for it, and certainly maize and cassava contributed greatly. Our foods have become more or less cosmopolitan, and I'm reminded of this when I eat a Mexican meal. And now with this lecture here, the next time you go and eat at your local Mexican restaurant, I think you'll find that over half of the food items come not from Mexico, but from Europe or Asia. And let me conclude by saying that the human change of the environment in the Americas began in a modest way when people first entered from Asia. Indian agriculture was not terribly destructive of the land, but this changed with the arrival of the Europeans. The clearing of fields for crops and livestock occurred rapidly, and we lost many native indigenous organisms, we lost soil, and we lost people. Nearly all the Indians of the Antilles had largely disappeared in 30 years. Not only from laboring in the gold mine, being killed by dogs, and laboring on the plantations, but principally from the introduced diseases. They killed more of the Americans than any other of the things I've mentioned. Today, the destruction of our forest continues on a scale never known before. There are too many people. But we can't blame Columbus for all of this, for the discovery of the Americas was inevitable. And even though his name is not attached to the continents, it shall be forever associated with this great Columbian exchange. Thank you.